Hey everybody, this is Carl back again for another Marvel X-Men spoiler review. In this comic, I will be covering Nightcrawler, Kurt Wagner. And yeah, man, I really need to read more of some Nightcrawler stuff. I mean, the first time I read an actual Nightcrawler kind of story was a couple of years ago. I think it was 2021, where it was like a 5-issue thing. Had to be no, it had to be before a Krakoa thing, because he was like living he was starring the movies and stuff in LA. It was a mini series. It was fun, but that was actually the first kind of Nightcrawler center story that I've remember reading through and through. This one was say like 2014 that was came out, this 12-issue run. This is written by Roberto Aguirre-Sacasa. Sorry if I feel like I'm butchering that name, but the art that's the art by uh Derek Robertson. Okay, let's quickly go over, well, before we get really into it, in case you have not been following me in my social media, I'm starting to collect questions for my Hot Ones challenge video. I already put out like stuff on my Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, please leave a comment below. Let me know what kind of questions you want to ask me. I'm only collecting 10, so I want to collect some 10 good questions from you guys. Whether you ask me about geeky things like like comics, movies, TV shows, certain general topics, whatever like that. Only collecting 10 of these, so I'm making good. You can leave them here in the comments, or at least in any of my YouTube videos in the comments, or you can go to my Twitter or my Instagram and leave them there. So because I'm getting close to the 400 subscriber goal, I want to make sure I start collecting the questions now so I can be ready, rather than like holding off on the video while I'm gathering questions later in the game. I don't want to do that, so I'll let you guys know this now. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to said video, and if you think anybody else will enjoy my content, please bring them along and tell them about me. And now we'll be going over Nightcrawler's abilities. Of course, yes, he can teleport, obviously. Ability to teleport himself, the clothes he is wearing, and within limits a certain amount of additional mass which is in contact with them. He teleports by displacing himself into the Brimstone dimension, traveling through it, and then returning to his own dimension as a certain distance from his point of departure. That's why he has this bamf noise. And kudos to Stan Lee, who come up with these kind of little signature noises that we're familiar with that are just distinct, like Spider-Man's thwip sounds that he's releasing web lines, Nightcrawler's bamfs, and like Wolverine snits as he protrudes his claws, or releases his claws. Very, very clever sound effects that he came up with. This I cannot unthink about it, and anybody who's writing anything with Nightcrawler in it has to include the bamf onomatopoeia. And the brimstone dimension, that's why anytime Nightcrawler teleports in and out, there's like a dust or a cloud left behind that you get a whiff of brimstone, because he has to go through the like a midway point through the brimstone dimension to go into another area on the earthly plane. He consciously determines his point of return. The entire process occurs so quickly that Nightcrawler is unaware of being in the brimstone dimension at all. Nightcrawler guides himself through the brimstone dimension by a subconscious, natural direction finding sense. Although Nightcrawler controls his teleportation ability with his conscious mind, his power to teleport is not psionic. Rather, it is a result of an unknown biochemical, biophysical reaction which he triggers mentally. When he disappears in teleporting, Nightcrawler leaves behind smoke with a stench of reminiscent burning brimstone. This is a small portion of the atmosphere of the brimstone dimension that escapes while the aperture is open. His teleportation is invariably accompanied by the muffled sound of imploding air rushing to fill the vacuum left where Nightcrawler's body was, creating his signature BAMF sound. Nightcrawler's powers automatically displace liquids and gases when he arrives in the course of a teleportation. His powers will not displace solids, however, putting him at risk of materializing inside solid matter, causing serious injury or death. As a consequence, Nightcrawler typically teleports only to places he has been to before or knows the layout of, or a line of sight teleportation, even though his actual range is much further. Kurt's intuitive spatial awareness allows him to track his movements instinctively and with greater precision than the average person, helping him to pinpoint locations for a blind teleport. The longer the distance over which Nightcrawler teleports himself, the harder and more exhausting it is for him to make the teleportation jump. It is easier for him to teleport between north and south along Earth's magnetic field lines than it is for him to teleport between east and west against the magnetic lines. Under optimal conditions, teleporting only himself and his costume, Nightcrawler can displace himself a distance of about 2 miles east to west, up to 3 miles north to south. Making a vertical teleportation upwards is difficult and dangerous, fighting against both the electromagnetic and gravitational fields. Nightcrawler has made a vertical teleportation jump of 1 mile, pushing himself to his physical limits. Before his death, Kurt was able to port Hope and himself from Las Vegas to San Francisco, which is 585 miles, and he was weakened and near death at the time. Sometime after his initial resurrection, Kurt appeared to have expanded his teleportation abilities, able to make longer jumps than before without the aid of the BAMFs, having warped 7,853 miles all the way from Dubai to the Savage Land in Antarctica, and again traveling 2,936 miles from Prague to Al-Qasir in Egypt. More recently, before his rebirth by the Five, Pixie stated that his teleportation distance has increased as a crazy amount, having teleported from Cocoa to Rub al Khali, Saudi Arabia, with 2 people effortlessly, even though he had never been there. It wasn't a blind teleportation since the coordinates were psionically placed in his mind. Nightcrawler's momentum is retained throughout the process of teleportation. Before we continue, he needs to be able to see where he's going, otherwise he'll end up in the wall, as stated in X2. He arrives with whatever amount of inertia he left with. For example, if he were falling from a great height, he could not teleport himself towards the ground in order to save himself. He will land with the same velocity that he teleported with. He can subtract this inertia by teleporting short distances upwards, as though taking 2 steps back for everyone forward. The limits to the mass that Nightcrawler can carry with him while teleporting and the limits to the distance over which he can teleport himself with additional load is unknown. When he transports a passenger over even moderate distances, they both feel weakened and ill, to the point of exhaustion. Teleportation over further distances could be fatal. Through practice, Nightcrawler has increased the mass he can teleport with him. He can teleport himself and Storm from the center of a small island into the water just off his coast without harming either of them. The upper limits of his capacity are yet unknown. Nightcrawler can use his powers offensively by grappling with an enemy and teleporting him or her in a series of rapid jumps. The strain of these multiple ports can exhaust foes without superhuman endurance, while Nightcrawler remains strong enough to continue fighting. Sometime after his resurrection, Kurt appeared to have expanded on his teleportation abilities to be able to make longer jumps than before without the aid of the BAMFs, having, doing the warp between Dubai and Antarctica. Beacon teleportation. Before and after his resurrection, Nightcrawler has created for himself a rather unique means of expanding his teleportation range. Through the deal he made with his father's own nightmares gremlins, Kurt now has the capacity to lock onto their transspatial displacement signature as a means of warping to their exact location, regardless of whether Kurt can see where he is warping or not, enabling him to teleport over global or even across dimensional distances, so long as he maintains the connection with them. In his own words, anywhere I go, they can go, and vice versa. Subconscious spatial awareness. Nightcrawler has a very limited subconscious extrasensory ability that prevents him from teleporting himself so that his feet, for example, would not materialize below the surface of the local ground. Because this ability is so limited, however, Nightcrawler will not teleport into any place that he cannot see or has not seen in the past. If Nightcrawler teleported himself into an unfamiliar area, he would run the risk of materializing partially or entirely within a solid object. If too much of his body materialized within a solid object, he would probably be killed. As part of his power, Nightcrawler has also exhibited a limited ability to sense the teleportation of other beings. Micro suction disc. Nightcrawler can stick to objects with the surface of his hands and feet. Very like Spider-Man, can crawl on walls. Flexible bone structure. Nightcrawler's bone structure allows him great flexibility. Camouflage. He has the ability to blend into the shadows, both as a result of his indigo fur and his connection to the light-bending attributes of the dimension through which he teleports. Prehensile tail. Nightcrawler has a tail allows him to grab onto objects with relative ease. His tail is strong enough to not only support his body weight, but also lift an adult man completely off the ground. It is deft enough to fight like a sword or a blunt object. Night vision. Nightcrawler always has glowing eyes, granting him a marked degree of heightened night vision as well. Agility. Nightcrawler's ability to be agile, balance, and body coordination are enhanced to levels beyond the human norms. Superhuman reflexes, self-explanatory. Immortality, thanks to the Nightcrawler cannot return from the afterlife due to sacrificing his soul in order to resurrect himself. This means Kurt cannot die by any natural means, although he did die on a mission in space when he's consumed by a Coronoa, but was later resurrected by the Five. He's a master acrobat, master combatant, expert at fencing, an aviator. He's an expert pilot, a medic, multilingual. Of course, he is fluent in German, his natural language, and in English. He also speaks French, Spanish, Krakoan, and Italian, and Japanese. Weaknesses. Despite Nightcrawler's superhuman powers, he is just as susceptible to disease and physical injury as any ordinary human. Also, because he's a Nephilim, Angel's blood, which heals everyone else, hurts him, normally adding to whatever injury he received. He also used these image inducers, as we'll see through the story, that he can camouflage himself to look like a normal human being, as he's typically going through a populated area with ordinary people. Oof. Okay. Now that we covered Nightcrawler's skills and powers, let's go over this particular story. Storm approaches Kurt with a top secret mission that she feels he's more an expert in. There is this hospital for sick kids and usually abandoned kids that experience a murder. There were 13 kids that were brutally murdered, that there was no signs of a break-in. There was a guard on duty, but he left to go to the bathroom. He was gone for 4 minutes and came back. All but one kid was dead. It was like 14 kids in one room. The only kid that survived unharmed was this kid named Seth Walker, who kind of looks like the kid from Sixth Sense. Through this 12-issue run, there's gonna be a lot of like movie callbacks here and there. One Ghostbusters, Exorcist, a Jaws reference. So Storm is believing that, okay, it's possible that somebody might have teleported in. So she is going to Kurt because he can handle this a little bit more tactfully than most of the other X-Men members, and his empathy is probably like, you know, the best in handling this typical situation. So Kurt goes to meet his inside man or woman. Get this, Christine Palmer. And if you don't remember that freaking name, shame on you, because she appeared twice in the Doctor Strange films. And here, she pretty much looked like one of those pinup girls wearing those, sexy nurse outfits. Because that is a very sexy nurse outfit. That is just like, you're not even, you know what you was doing when you joined Christine Palmer in this, because she is like extra sexy in this. And of course, she is caught like a love bug for Kurt, but Kurt, considering that he is trying to avoid, romantic attachments, because they don't all end. They end on good terms, but it's never long lasting. He's a little heartbreaker kind of situation. Not like on purpose, but it's just like things tend to not like a happy ending kind of situation. And of course, Christine Palmer is one of two night nurses. You remember Claire from the Netflix shows? She is a night nurse too. These two are well known in the superhero community, where they actually, I don't know if they even still do this, but they should, where they actually have this secret hospital set up where superheroes who want to keep their secret identity, if they have a secret identity, secret, so they can go and get patched up if something happens. If they can't go to, like, if an X-Men member can't get to the medical facilities in the X Mansion or Krakoa in this case, then they can easily go to a night nurse. But typically, it's usually street level characters like Luke Cage or Jessica Jones who would utilize these facilities more often than not. And because Christine Palmer and Claire, I forgot Claire's last name, I think it was Claire Temple, I think, had met at one point or another various members of the superhero community and passed them up. So they have earned their trust where they can just like, reveal themselves and look after them and, that kind of stuff. Very cool. I wish they do a lot more with that. So Kurt goes in to question the security guard. And what's this guy's name? Barney. Thought it'd be an easier name to remember, all things considered. And because throughout the years, it was like he worked there for like 12 years. At no point that Barney ever deviated from his scheduled break or whatever, because if, unless he's actually scheduled to go on his lunch break or 10-minute break or whatever, he will like stay there and unmoving. So this is why it's kind of peculiar that all of a sudden he slinks away on an unauthorized break time, even though he just went to the bathroom. Even though it is something up, but it's just like on the outside looking in, he could have just gone to the bathroom. He just probably had to pee. You don't need you can't schedule a pee break. And as Barney is trying to like talk with Kurt, he starts bringing up like, do you believe in forgiveness? Because he used to be a priest. Do you still believe it? And Kurt's like, yeah. It's like, of course I still believe all that stuff. I used to be a priest, but I still believe. And this is the thing. All right, two things I want to bring up here now. The one fault I give this, issue run that Roberto, seemed to kind of go back and forth with is Kurt is, very widely known to be a German, a German man, and he has a very well-known German accent. It doesn't have to be super thick, but it should be very prevalent in his dialogue. There's times when they kind of flip-flop that. Why I say that? Because there are times when he actually says the very German way of saying "mein Gott," and then there's other times where he says "my God," English, and that kind of is nitpicky. But I was like, God, it's not very consistent. And given somebody like Kurt, he should be constantly saying things in a very German way with very German accents and tones. Like, my God should be prevalent anytime he says it. And it seems like the writer might keep forgetting that. But also, I give it a plus that anybody who's writing in about Kurt has to remember that he has worked as a priest before. He's very religious. Probably more so than even Daredevil himself. And that's saying a lot. But as Kurt's trying to figure out, like, okay, why all of a sudden did he step away from his post? Very randomly, in comes Dr. Childs, who just stops everything, who runs this hospital. But Kurt goes to meet Seth. Of course, Seth kind of freaks out because after what he probably witnessed, seeing, because Kurt does appear like a very demon kind of appearance. After a while, you do get, once you see it once, you kind of get past that hump, but then you kind of get used to it, unless somebody prepares you for it, which, Christine probably should have prepared this kid for it, because Seth just isn't talking, is like refused to talk. It's almost like he just cannot say nothing for some reason. Of course, the kid freaks out. Kurt bamps out onto the roof of the building, calls up Storm to let her know, like, okay, clearly something is going on here. I'm just not getting much from anybody. But then he starts noticing hoof prints on the roof. Hoof prints. Now, unless Santa Claus made an unscheduled delivery, that's very weird. So he follows the hoof prints to this other building not too far away, where Dr. Childs is having like a gathering with other rich socialites. And of course, Nightcrawler, being able to blend into the shadows, does his Spider-Man thing. He even comments on it. It's like, Spider-Man, eat your heart out. Kind of stuff. Like, okay, dude. So he blends in the shadows right at that moment, because I'm not sure how long it took before like Childs left the area to go to this place. But here comes on the streets Barney screaming like, "Take your blood money!" Like, you know, I'm telling everything, like, because his guilt is obviously coming over him, and through some mysterious means, Dr. Child just like closes windows, like, "That's a shame, Barney. I had high hopes for you." And then all of a sudden, Barney just bursts into freaking flames. And at first, because you know, you got to read on, because this is where like the first issue ends, where like Kurt was like, "I don't know what to do." You don't know what to do? You get freaking teleport, which he does, because like the person's burning. The first thing you do if you have teleportation, teleport him to the nearest water source. But in the next issue, he does, but this is not normal fire. If you read enough Ghost Rider, Barney is consumed by hellfire, and hellfire cannot be doused out by normal means, like, you know, like normal fire suppressant type of stuff. So as they're in the lake, and Barney is like, realizing like, okay, he is like, can't help me at this point. So the last ditch effort just prevent Kurt from getting himself hurt and possibly drowning. He pushes Kurt away and succumbs to his fatal wounds. And Kurt is, kind of distraught, like, I couldn't save him. And for some reason, the water did not douse out those flames. So he knows indefinitely there's something supernatural going on. So he goes to see, I know how this might sound, his former sister / lover. Now, I say sister, I should say foster sister. Because Kurt, is Mystique's son. She, trying to prevent a mob from hurting her and him. She left him the very Moses-like thing, some off like on like a little bridge with a water current to like carry him off, somewhere. And some Romani woman, of course they called them gypsies back then, but Romani is the proper term now. Whereas Romani woman picks her up, and she already had 2 small children, one girl and one boy. Boy named Stefan or Steven. I say Stefan, and the girl being Amanda. And Amanda and her mother had like a very, predisposed to having like affiliation with magic. And at this point in time, Amanda is the current ruler of Limbo. And so, as I mentioned in my Magic Ilyana Rasputin review, comic review, which you can check out on my YouTube channel, it should be up on the channel by this point. There's been many rulers of the Limbo dimension. Currently is Ilyana, Amanda being also one of them in the past. And man, the way they is drawing a lot of these women's very like pin-up art. clearly pinup art. So he goes to Amanda to try to see, like, okay, about this boy who is somehow cannot speak. Come to find out, this, according to Amanda, this kid probably has a mutant ability to be attuned to magic. He probably doesn't realize what he's doing, because he starts making these kind of like little ropes and he's tying up knots. He's making a lock spell without realizing he's making a lock spell, because probably so traumatized of what he witnessed, he keeping himself from speaking or spilling certain secrets. So you got to break that. So with an image inducer, he goes back to speak with Seth so that he won't freak out. And as he's trying to get Seth to talk now that he's realizing about like the untying the knots, here comes Dr. Childs again, and with a strange woman saying that, oh, this is Seth's aunt. And now since his legal guardian is here now, even though she comes out of nowhere, Kurt's no longer needed, and he will be Seth will be taken away. And for a split second, Kurt turns around and for a split second sees not this old woman claiming to be Seth's aunt, and looks like it is, but he thought he saw some kind of monster. So thanks to some strings that Christine pulled, she's able to sneak Kurt in to speak with Seth without being interrupted. Especially after the fact that she pulled him to the side to show him that the corpses of those children that was about to be examined suddenly burst into flames and turned to ash. The fire alarms didn't go off, nothing brought to anybody's attention. She just found them that way to leave no evidence to be examined. So this is where like this kid looks just like the kid from The Sixth Sense. Straight looks like it. I see dead people situation. This kid's making these little clay dolls, or he calls them jars, but they're not jars, they're dolls. That part kind of rubbed me the wrong way. It's like, why you call them jars? It's kind of like I guess they trying to correlate between like those Egyptian canopic jars where once the body of a pharaoh is embalmed, you take certain parts of the organs and put them in those jars to be buried along with the body in the tombs. I guess it's like akin to that, but there's no opening, so you can't really call it a jar at all. These are dolls. But I digress. So Kurt asked, was continuing asking him, about like what's carrying on, and Seth feels bad because nothing you can do about it, because it just happened out of nowhere, and his friends' bodies was like just been mutilated, and it was like almost instantaneously. But he also brings out to Kurt's like, they're all gonna die and I'm gonna die, and Kurt's like you're not gonna die, you're gonna be all right. Like I'm going to die. He seems like he can tell that someone's afoot. But then Christine bursts in and tells Kurt like something's going on, is out on the street. Seth's aunt is attacking Dr. Childs, and this woman's just freaking out, saying things like, oh, free our brethren, free them. It's like you swore. So the crowd's looking on, just seeing this old lady freaking out on this man, and nobody's jumping in and doing anything because I guess it's like a protection spell, warding physical interference. But Nightcrawler teleports through all that somehow. He should have been probably slammed into the invisible supernatural wall, but I guess certain mutant abilities trumps certain magic, I guess. So he teleports through this kind of invisible barrier and imports the woman into a church where this woman's being possessed clearly, and the because not only by one demon but 13 demons, and they escape and they are collected in this seal by Dr. Childs in a different building. So Amanda, then Kurt took the time to question her about what she remembers. Turns out he's not related to Seth at all. She pretty much was a hobo. Dr. Childs found her, cleaned her up, and she doesn't remember everything else, but using her magic, Amanda probes further about things that she kind of was forced to forget, where these 13 demons was possessing her to try to utilize Seth to get their 14th brethren to come to the earthly plane. Turns out these Dr. Childs and these high society socialites have been planning to make these kind of deals to try to get these demons to work for them forever, pretty much like they're slaves or like bodyguards or whatever, for whatever use you choose to use them for, in exchange for their freedom from the depths of hell. However, things go awry because like Seth's predisposed to use some magic kind of like screwed up the kind of process where the 14th demon couldn't burst out, or at least it didn't go through, because this is confusing, because it's like, is it supposed to all go through each child? And maybe because Seth's connection to a budding magic that he's attuned to kind of prevents like a swift transition for that demon to be released, or the demon kind of bounced around because the spell was off a bit. May have to reread this to be clear on that, because I'm just going with the fact that the kids kind of attuned to magic, kind of like holding it off a bit. Anyway, these 14 demons were the like right hand for Lucifer, Morningstar, who was leading a rebellion against heaven. When he fell, the 14 angels that was by his side fell and it became 14 demons. Pretty much his, like royal guard kind of situation. They're very high ranking, very powerful. So so now Dr. Childs pretty much takes Seth and brings him to the hideout where these sealed away 13 demons are, and try to complete the ritual so that way they can release the 14th one, because the deal cannot be complete unless all 14 are on the plane. So the 13 demons are waiting for their brother. So Kurt gets in, even because Dr. Childs is telling himself, like, don't expect any help from Mr. Wagner, because there's a protection spell, there's a seal. Nobody cannot get inside this building. But they didn't account for mutant abilities, like Shadowcat's phasing ability. And because they had image inducers, they took a place of 2 of the members and slipped through and started to protect the kid. realizing the demon starting to try to claw his way out of the kid, utilizing her phasing ability, Shadowcat allowed the kid to become intangible, so the demons can just safely come out without killing the kid. So since the kid wasn't inside the circle when the demon is released, the demon's outside the circle, therefore not bound to the orders of Dr. Childs. So Dr. Childs is like, because the demons is like are already trying to renege on the deal. It's like, destroy the seal, brother, let us free. And then the demons going over and just starting to attack Dr. Childs. And then all the other socialite elites that were a part of this, try to run out of the building, but are blocked. The exit are blocked by the X-Men, because like, oh, hell no, you're not going anywhere. You're under arrest. Every last one of you are under arrest for the murder of for 13 children. So F all of you. Please give us a reason to, just hurt any one of you for that. So thanks to Amanda coming in now to do cleanup on these demons, she bound these demons towards these dolls of Seth made, and she keeps them like in her home in Limbo to watch over. And now, like, Seth is gonna be doing okay, living like a relatively normal life in the hospital. Probably found like a foster parent at some point. But that's the end of that one adventure. This all connects, but we'll get to it. Now, there's a two-part story where it's kind of like a ghost on the tracks of the New York subway, where the conductor of one of this train, this out of control train, is dead from fright. So after Kurt, Storm, Wolverine, and Christine go to see like a Broadway play, which kind of funny, where you hear like, Wolverine talking like, yeah, he actually liked this kind of stuff. But Kurt, surprisingly, his swashbuckling kind of attitude actually does not care for, people just randomly bursting into the song. He doesn't find it comfortable. I thought that was pretty funny. You'll think that would be the other way around. So Kurt notices, thanks to Storm's electrical ability to, her weather ability, she used electricity to hit the third rail of the subway to halt the out of control train. Kurt notices something on the tracks, finds a ghost that's trying to attack him, but it goes right through him, and he's like covered in ectoplasm. And of course, Wolverine, kudos to the writer, because Wolverine immediately goes with the Ghostbusters line, "You got slimed." It's like, how can you not make the reference? So he is after he gets cleaned up at Christine's place because it's nearby. He gets a call from Storm to go to speak with the mayor, and of course makes a Jaws reference because there's going to be a centennial celebrating the particular subway lines. Oh, it's a centennial, so I guess it's like an anniversary or something like that. And it's very Jaws because instead of closing this thing down until this whole situation with these ghosts are dealt with, he wants the X-Men to handle this under the radar, since the X-Men usually handle things under the radar. And of course, Kurt makes a reference about like calling like Doctor Strange or the Fantastic Four. Yeah, why don't you? Especially Doctor Strange. This is his bread and butter. Is dealing with like the kid and those demons and like these ghosts. It's of course this all connects, so you'll see why that it's Kurt centered thing that he has to resolve. But at least with this, why don't you call Doctor Strange to clean up this kind of situation with these ghosts? He can just done it like that. Done. It's so weird. But Kurt goes to the conductor's wife, and she brings up that for some odd reason, because this guy thought it was, he noticed these ghosts from his peripheral vision, every once in a while he's driving the train towards its where they keep the trains at a particular end of a line at the end of the day. He noticed them and they haven't really done any kind of harm. They're very passive, so he thought it's kind of like it's like it's easy going. It's kind of like there's no harm, no foul. I don't know, it's like a New York thing where you're just like, oh, that's just a typical New York thing. F that. That is so weird. That is so weird. I will not feel comfortable. I can't imagine anybody feeling comfortable if you're driving a train, especially at night, and you notice ghosts here and there. I don't care if they're passive. That freaks you the hell out. And it's like, I don't want to go down there. I wouldn't want to go down there. Why? It's like that's the kind of thing you directly go to Doctor Strange for. And of course, I think the mayor made like another reference, like who you gonna call? It's like Ghostbusters, Doctor Strange, somebody. Hell, I wouldn't take like Jessica Jones, but even she would probably go directly to Doctor Strange, or even Scarlet Witch if she's not like a bad guy at this point in time. Somebody with mystical means to deal with this. So Kurt goes down there and tussles with these ghosts because now they actually physically trying to harm him. And of course he does his bamfing teleportation, but as he gets the upper hand, they decide to be a little more passive and point to the direction that Kurt needs to go, where he finds against the wall this stray bone, which he takes directly to Hank to examine. And as he's going over it, they had this kind of little blase talk about Christine, how he has trouble with maintaining like a solid relationship with a woman, and he doesn't want to hurt her in the end because it's where it always leads to. And Beast, had this kind of like as he put it, like a complex. He's starting to get, because they're both blue and furry, but he gets trouble getting a date while Kurt is just plowing through girls left and right, and it's like okay, what the hell kind of attitude. It's like, what the hell, man. But it's definitely, the bone he found was definitely human. So Kurt, doing some research in a library and going through the public records, come to find out that this bone belongs to a miner, back in their early days of the New York subway construction for the first time. And the mayor of that time hid the fact that there was like a mine collapse that took the lives of at least 8 to a dozen people, miners underneath there, some being related. And it was like a huge cover-up, because it's very Exorcist, supernatural TV show. It's like it gets a hallmark to like a typical ghost stories where Ghost has some unresolved issues or something like that. And because their story has been vastly just been ignored, and they became restless after all these years. So he goes to the mayor to try to set things right. You know, he's not the one responsible, but it's just like it just went completely ignored. So the mayor, during the centennial, while these ghosts are appearing, but the X-Men can see them, but you know, none of the people there can. The mayor decides to, like, you know, inform right away, like, you know, there's been like a grave injustice that's been overlooked for centuries, and we want to right this wrong now, where there's unfortunate miners who were responsible for helping lay the foundation to our great city, that their murders have been left unresolved. So we're finding all their descendants, and we're making reparations to them, and acknowledgement of what transpired. This resolves everything, and the ghosts finally were able to be laid to rest. This is a very nice story. The next and final arc that we're on with Nightcrawler, where he is essentially in a coma and having horrible dreams, and he was attacked by this, I don't know if you call him like a mutant, but this little imp like guy who poisoned Kurt. And Kurt is having like these visions, and he's on a fatal cusp. Well, like Bobby Drake is trying to keep his body temperature at like a good temperature. Emma's trying to get inside his head to try to pull him out of it, and of course Hank McCoy is trying to you know do the operation. And in his subconscious, Kurt is just envisioning Christine Palmer, Storm, and Amanda, all three of which either he has intimate ties to or had relations with at some form or another. And I, maybe because like I haven't read much stories with Storm and Kurt being together, because there's only been two people that I remember Storm ever hooking up with, and that was T'Challa, who she actually married at one time with, and then there's Wolverine, which was like a Days of Future Past kind of story, or Age of Apocalypse story. My apologies. But I know her. The X-Men really kind of like bounce around each other when it comes to sexual kind of moments. It's kind of like they're all Eskimo brothers and sisters in that freaking place. It's and only gotten twice as, I wouldn't say twice as bad, but only like twice as big when they got into the Krakoa Island, where it turns into a freaking sex island. He's the Nightcrawler was the one who made, like, once they was making their rules, one of the rules that Kurt made up was like be fruitful and multiply kind of situation, and no mutant shall harm another mutant kind of situation, unless the mutant does a horrific act, on human first or mutant first, or whatever. But these three women turn into, I guess, like the Sisters of Fate. They got snake hair like Medusa, which is kind of really mixing up your mythology there. And they holding like the string of Kurt's life. And this giant sentinel comes out of the water and smashes the boat that they're on. And he's swimming the depths of the ocean, where he comes across this trunk that he's trying to open, but he is being pulled out in time by Emma before he's lost to them forever. So through these strange events, Kurt feels like, okay, having these nightmares that's tied to my past. So he feels like it's time to head home to investigate. So he goes back to his homeland where he was raised by his Romani stepmother, foster mother, and Christine's palling around with them, and Logan is tagging along because he's an expert tracker, so why not have him? And Kurt is just remembering his time being raised in the circus. He's actually gone in 2 circuses, I guess, because I only remember one circus, and it was supposed to be that one that turns out bad for him, but it's 2 circuses, one in Germany and one in America. In Germany, he is raised with his foster brother and sister, Amanda and Stefan. Stefan is concerned about his brother and sister, his mother and sister, especially his mother, because they're dabbling in these mystical arts that he feels will lead to no good. It's the work of the devil, all that stuff, very old-fashioned kind of thinking. And he's worried that he will fall prey to that kind of stuff. And he made Kurt promise that, hey, if anything happens to me, you will do what you need to do to stop me. You have to promise me. And of course, Kurt promises. And I was worried at first, because typically in these kind of stories, the brother gets kind of jealous, or he thinks his brother's a freak once he sees his ability to teleport and how he looks, blah, blah, blah. But no, he actually cared for Kurt, which is kind of, a nice change of pace. It's like normally stories don't be put out like that. But it is kind of weird that, even though they're not related, this kind of reminds me of the whole situation in the Flash TV show that just, wrapped up. That during the season when they finally put Barry and Iris together, which I always thought was kind of weird at first anyway, when the show started, where Barry was raised in the same house by Iris's father, who's pretty much like a stepfather to him, and these two were essentially brother and sister, and they end up, hooking up, having a kid, getting married, stuff like that. And it's off-putting at first. Why didn't you just, why you have them being raised in the same household as brother and sister? It's off-putting. It's, seems like, wow, it's kind of, but it kind of gave me those kind of vibes too. Because dude, she's essentially your sister and you hooking up with her. But I also appreciate the fact that she's an acrobat, and she's wearing similar costume to what Kurt normally wears as his signature costume as he's with the X-Men. I thought that was very cool. But once they get to the circus, it's being burned to the ground. There's a lot of fatalities, only a few survivors. And in limbo, Amanda's mom shows up, finds Amanda being beaten by Doctor Strange's arch enemy, normally one of his enemies, Nightmare, who turns out to be manipulated by outside forces. It's kind of weird because you expect some kind of battle between Nightmare and the mom, but it goes right into him being tied up, and I thought that kind of bothered me. You didn't give me no panel of a fight with Nightmare and this woman who's a very mystical, a very powerful mystic in her own right. You don't get none of that. But Kurt also reminisces about his time as he's want to explore more of the world, so he travels in this other circus by this fat guy who is obviously a bigot, and he goes to Florida. He knocks out Kurt with his drug and put him on display as a sideshow freak kind of situation. but is, Kurt is rescued by this other kid who turns out to be a mutant himself with the ability to sense other mutants, because in his point of view, mutants have like a particular aura that he can always sense. So he comes in the dead of night to release Kurt from his shackles, and Kurt immediately like attacks the fat guy and tells him, "You lucky I believe in redemption. So, you gonna release everybody who you are keeping held captive here, and who doesn't want to be here, and those who prefer to stay, you're gonna treat them with some freaking dignity. If not, I'll come back in 2 weeks. If I don't see any changes, it's gonna be the end of you." And of course, Kurt never came back, because I guess it was around the time when he got picked up by Professor Xavier and joined the X-Men. But as he's coming to this particular circus, after he takes the Blackbird from Cyclops, after he comes to help care for the injured from the German circus, from his German home, he takes the Blackbird along with Christine and Wolverine to go back to America, to Florida, to because something's coming after all the places that Kurt lived. They're specifically targeting Kurt. And so as he's trying to warn the old man now, who was the one who held Kurt captive, Man-Thing shows up along with a bunch of zombified corpses and this other character named Carrion, who can pretty much suck the life force of anybody he touches through his palms. And of course, Man-Thing, whoever feels fear burns by the touch of the Man-Thing. They all go and eventually go to sleep thanks to the interference of Nightmare, try to keep the battle down. And they come to realize, okay, they're on a search for the Soul Sword, which Amanda and the mom hidden away because it was in limbo, but it's constantly being under attack by forces that wants to claim the Soul Sword for various evil purposes. So since Kurt was like pure of heart, they hid the sword unknowingly in Kurt's soul, where that's why it was in that trunk in his subconscious that he's trying to unlock. And now Kurt is aware of it, he can easily pull it out, and he became the wielder. But they come to realize that because this old man was being possessed by this creature that's been behind all this named Hive, because it got give this guy like a pungent smell, and the flies are always buzzing around him for some reason, and they won't dissipate. Comes to realize that he's being possessed by this fly thing, and it releases itself from this man's body and possesses Wolverine. And this isn't the first time that Kurt has tangled with this thing before. He just never knew what it was specifically. This thing actually possessed his own brother a long time ago. It causes Stefan to murder several children back in the day, because Stefan thinking like, they're actually demons, and I'm trying to get them before they harm anybody. Of course, Kurt didn't believe him, and because he was about to kill one survivor, because he's going over scenarios like, I was so inexperienced back then. I could have teleported the kid away. I could have teleported my brother away, but I just went in my, the first thought, and just inadvertently just snapped my own brother's neck to stop all the madness. And that kind of thing haunted, Kurt for years. Come to find out that, of course, this demon is kind of toying with Kurt, that, Maybe you did it, maybe I did it. But it's kind of funny that you carry that blood on your hands all this time. Who's to say who did what? Of course, Kurt using the soul sword, because after this demon possessed Wolverine mortally wounded Christine, but thanks to Amanda healed her, and Kurt snapping Wolverine's neck, even though it won't do anything. And how you gonna snap Wolverine's neck when he's got an adamantium lace skeleton? Figure that one out, but let's not quibble over that. So he takes the soul sword, and as the demon is being released out of Wolverine's body, he just slashes at the swarm and starts to interrogate the mutated looking fly, who is the real embodiment of Hive, and he just ends up dying in Kurt's hand. Saying, before he does, he gives like a grave warning to Kurt, like there are other dark forces that are breaking the walls of these different dimensions. There's a coming war kind of situation. And of course, Amanda and her mother confirmed as such with Kurt, and they pretty much have to prepare for anything that's coming down their way. And of course, the soul sword is being left with Kurt at the time. Pretty soon it's being given to Magic at a certain point. So after that event, the X-Men and Christine celebrate Kurt's birthday. And then, just like in X2, everybody freezes in time. And the cold air, the temperature really drops for around Kurt. And he goes to a different room and notices Mephisto showing up. It's Mephisto. Look at me. I'm so evil. It's like so eccentric. Like I love making Ghost Riders. It's like he just people like to say, oh, this because Marvel Comics cannot use the actual, because God or the devil, even though they utilize their names like God and Lucifer every once in a while, but they can't actually depict the actual their own version of it. And they kind of depending on who you ask, some people like to consider Mephisto to be like Marvel's devil, but I don't agree to that. Looking it up a long time ago, Mephisto, because there's different realms to hell in the Marvel universe. Mephisto is in charge of one particular level. He just has more interaction in the Marvel universe, more so than any other demon that you might see come up in various different adventures with various different Marvel characters. In a whole comic, there is an entity called the One Below All, which I believe that is the actual devil. Check it out. He's a little bit more massive and more power, and he's at the lowest level of hell, while Mephisto's a little bit higher. And then there's one above all that I've seen in a Spider-Man event, where you can argue that is the actual God of Marvel Universe. And of course, there's been other various deities throughout Marvel Comics, but he kind of looks like Keanu Reeves to me. But the one above all is Marvel's God. You can look it up. Those are, because they have to work their way around. I mean, DC got away with it. I'm not sure why Marvel can get away with it, but that is just another a different name they ascribe to for God and Lucifer. One above all and one below all, and they're the biggest powers of the Marvel universe. Despite what you might think with eternity or or Mephisto or Thanos or Odin or Zeus or whatever. You know, one above all is the most powerful, and one below all is probably like second powerful. But you know, you don't want to quibble over the matters like that. But that's my take on it. And Mephisto want to just, you know, have like a walk in and talk with Kurt a little bit about what he went through in the past couple of adventures. And it's a nice little attention to detail, because this man is just literally this embodiment of evil that Kurt points out that even the ground he walks on immediately dies with each step he takes. And Mephisto comes to Kurt, obviously to make a deal, but points out that there's going to be a war coming, and all the stuff that you went through are pretty much just like, you know, symptoms to a larger problem that's going to be coming up, like the 14 demons that he had to deal with those with that Dr. Childs, the ghosts that happened, that appeared because they, as he put it, like opportunists, because why they show up all of a sudden, or at least why all of a sudden they became more violent when they weren't before. And the whole situation with Hive. Things are coming, and I'll make you a deal, like, because he just wants him to just stay aside, don't interfere, because he doesn't even want the soul sword. He doesn't really care about that. He just wants Kurt to stand aside. Clearly Kurt, who knows what kind of larger adventure that Kurt is probably gonna have to be a part of, probably some kind of Marvel event I'm not familiar with, but he just wants Kurt to not interfere, and in return all his friends, his family, they will just not be harmed for some reason. They'll just magically just not be harmed despite whatever might happen. And Kurt just punches the hell out of him, because true to his Catholic nature, it's like, screw you, devil, like, I will not be tempted by you. And like, you know, he's like, that was a big mistake, Kurt. And of course he, you know, flashes back to the point where Kurt was about to blow out his birthday candles, and time goes back to normal. Of course, Kurt and Christine, you know, obviously they won't continue on with their relationship. This is just a one adventure that she's like a part of in his life, but they share a moment together. Even though he spent this whole entire adventure trying to keep her at arm's length, he decides, like, you know what, you know, I just want to enjoy this kind of moment because I really do like her, and he just shares a kiss with her. It was a cool Nightcrawler story. You get, like, you know, get in returning back to his past, and given the fact of the way he looks, is, you know, it's funny that he gets involved in more supernatural stuff, where, well, the X-Men primarily focuses on either superhero related stuff or sci-fi stuff, or even time travel stuff. Depending on the particular character, they typically don't deal with magical elements unless you're dealing with actual Elena or Wanda. You know, they typically don't deal with like the magic, you know, side of things of the superhero universe, unless they're supporting characters. But I guess, you know, given Kurt's backstory and familial background, I guess it fits. But it's a pretty decent story for Nightcrawler. Not one of my favorites, but I do like it. Not one of my favorite stories, and not something like, oh my god, the writing was like. There's been times when you read a particular comic or event, it's like my Batman Failsafe arc that I reviewed a while ago, which is on the channel right now if you want to hear my thoughts on it. That one, I give rave reviews. I love the dialogue in that. The art in that is fantastic. Everything like that. You know, it doesn't give me those type of feelings, but I do enjoy this. I do enjoy the art somewhat, because the way the art fails on me, depending on the faces that is being drawn, like Wolverine's face and Stefan's face, for example, because there's been other ones, but those two primarily, I do not like the look of their faces, the way they're drawn. I like the Kurt's face, the way it is drawn. And of course, the female characters, the way they're drawn is excellent. Obviously, like I said, they're drawn like pinup girls. Like, you get those sexy prints at cons, they kind of are drawn like that. That's probably why I think, you know, I think like, you can tell what focus this probably was more so on than it was put on over certain other things. And certain references to, you know, horror genres, you know, like the movies. I don't consider Jaws like a horror movie, but I guess depending on your generation, I guess you consider it like a horror movie. But the callbacks to Jaws, Ghostbusters, Exorcist, you know, all these kind of things is very fun, given the fact that the kind of adventure that Kurt is under. But yeah, it's a pretty solid Nightcrawler story. There's a couple of other Nightcrawler stories that I think is probably a little bit better. You know, I want to read more Nightcrawler stories. I'm pretty sure there's better ones, but this was pretty solid. But anyway, leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought of, what you think of Nightcrawler in general. Is he your favorite X-Men character? You like his abilities? You like, you know, because a lot of people want to, like, love to have like a teleportation ability. It's very convenient. That way you can save yourself like a trip if you need to get somewhere. But anyway, the next comic that I'll be carrying will be Iceman. I want to, you know, read like an Iceman story. But anyway, I will see you all next time. I think tomorrow I'll be covering the Wolverine movie, so look forward to that. But anyway, have a good night, take care, be well, and I'll see you all soon for more X-Men reviews. Have a good night.